I am Siprapha Petmisi, a lecturer at the Institute of Human Rights and Peace Studies at Mahidol University. And I would like to introduce Helen Brandt, who has been working on the issue of statelessness for quite some years, and she has been also a close partner of the Institute. I'm very glad to have her here today.
Thank you, Siprapha.
Tell me, what is statelessness and who are stateless persons?
Well, there's an international law definition of a stateless person, and this says that a stateless person is someone who's not recognized as a national by any state under the operation of its law. So really, stateless people are those without any nationality.
But then why people become stateless? And what are the causes of statelessness?
There are many different reasons why people might become stateless. It's a very complex issue. And people might be stateless from birth, or they might become stateless later in their life. One of the main causes of people being stateless is discrimination. This could be based on their ethnicity, their language, their religion, or even on their gender. There's also people who are stateless because of state succession or because of the history of colonialism, where borders of countries were drawn arbitrarily, and this left people caught between two different countries and not recognized as citizens of anywhere. In terms of children, those who are born and their births are not registered could be at a very increased risk of statelessness. There's also a strong connection between statelessness and displacement. So when people are crossing an international border, this might render them at risk of statelessness, or they might be leaving because they don't have a nationality. There's also cases where countries have revoked people's nationality, maybe because they have lived outside of their country for an extended period of time, or because the country has arbitrarily decided that this group of people are no longer their citizens.
Or even, I would add, even when, the babies were abandoned somewhere without any documents, then he or she may become stateless persons as well.
That's true. The issue of foundlings who are born without known parentage is a big cause of statelessness as well.
Let's review the definition of statelessness. It is defined in the first article of the 1954 Convention relating to the status of stateless persons as a person who is not considered as a national by any state under the operation of its law. The main elements of the definition are that states give nationality through their law. The most common way of giving nationality are by descent, parents giving nationality to their children, or by being born in a country, or acquiring nationality through marriage, or living in a country for a length of time, sometimes known as being naturalized.
But Siprapha, can I ask you, is nationality important? Why does it matter? And what about state sovereignty? What does the right to a nationality mean?
Well, the concept of nationality is actually coming more or less in the same time with the concept of nation state. Nationality is there to protect the interests of the state itself. But from human rights perspective, nationality is a guarantee for people to enjoy and to get access to their rights. It is also important in the sense that nationality provides people with a sense of identity. So you see what we call identity card. Actually, people tend to associate with it because it's about his or her identity as well. However, the basic concept of state sovereignty plays very important roles in defining nationality here, because a nation, state, is usually define its geographical limits by territory and its demographic limits by nationality. So you see how important it is. Moreover, because of that particular concept of state sovereignty, nationality is usually attributed by birth. In some countries, maybe through birth in the territory or just solely. I give you an example of USA and Canada, for example. But in most countries around the world, nationality is given through parentage, and it's called jus sanguinis. However, whatever forms of attribution they follow, some states, and this is a positive trend, I guess. Some states grant citizenship to persons born in the territory who would be otherwise be stateless. And I give you example of Japan. So you see how important it is, nationality. Although we may say that, well, we have rights only because of the fact that we are human beings. But as I mentioned, nationality plays extremely important roles there.
I see. So are there international, regional frameworks that speak about nationality and protect people against statelessness?
Definitely. If you look at different international human rights treaties, for example, ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, or the International Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination, and CEDAW, for example, the International Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination, all recognize, the right to nationality, of course in different ways, but the concept is exactly the same, which say that everyone has the right to nationality. At regional level, I would add, in ASEAN, although ASEAN does not have a legally binding document, but the ASEAN Human Rights Declaration, which was adopted in 2012, in Article 18 is also recognize the right to nationality. I may also like to add, if I go back to international level, there are two specific conventions regarding statelessness. The first one is the 1954 Convention relating to status of stateless persons, and the second one is the 1961 Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness.
Let's review the two major conventions on statelessness. The first convention in 1954 is the Convention relating to the status of stateless persons, which defines statelessness and details the protection stateless people should receive, such as access to documents, recognition of marital status, and rights to religion, education, housing, access to justice, and so on. The 1961 Convention on the Reduction of Statelessness outlines what a state should do to stop people becoming stateless. It calls for states to give nationality to a child born stateless in their country, for states to ensure that both the mother and father can pass their nationality to their children, and for states to not take away someone's nationality if it makes them stateless. Statelessness is found in many other human rights treaties, like the CRC, CEDAW, ICCPR, ICERD, ICRMW, and CRPD.
I think another question which is related to statelessness and stateless persons, because there's an increasing problem there, which is about difference between stateless persons and refugees or an asylum seeker. Would you mind elaborating a bit about the differences? Because I think people tend to confuse.
Yes, there's a strong connection between statelessness and forced displacement, but there are also some important distinctions. But stateless people, refugees and asylum seekers are all in need of international protection because their link with a state has been broken or has been lost. Refugees are recognized as having a well-founded fear of persecution and are protected by the 1951 Refugee Convention. Refugees can also be stateless, but not all refugees are stateless. The majority of stateless people have not crossed an international border, so they're still within the country of their origin. But the connection is that stateless people who are not recognized as citizens and are subject to forms of discrimination or unable to enjoy their rights might be forced to flee across an international border. Equally, refugees who have left because of a fear of persecution might become stateless because they lose that link with their country of origin. So there is a strong connection.
So I guess there is a high chance or high risk for stateless persons to become asylum seekers or refugees in many cases, I guess. Do stateless persons have the same rights as the person with nationals? And I wonder what are the impacts or what are the implications of being statelessness?
Well, in law, all human beings have the same rights, and that's regardless of your nationality or even your lack of a nationality. But unfortunately, in reality, that's not always the case. Stateless people have very big challenges in accessing these rights that they should be entitled to. And the basic human rights that they have difficulty enjoying are things like primary education, access to affordable healthcare, the right to work legally or to seek a livelihood, even moving around, and they're at a very heightened risk of arrest and indefinite detention because they're considered to be foreigners and no country recognizes them as their nationals, so they can't be deported. So there are very, very serious and big implications for stateless people. But also there are psychological impacts of being a stateless person, and stateless people suffer greatly through their inability to prove their identity. They have challenges in getting identity cards or passports, so they're unable to travel freely. And it can have a big impact not just on individuals but also on their families and on their communities as well. And this is especially the case where statelessness can be passed on from generation to generation. It also has big implications for states as well. Stateless people are often an unseen or an uncounted population. So it makes it very difficult for states to plan their development interventions because stateless people are often not counted in national statistics as well. So it has very wide-reaching implications for individuals, communities, but also for states themselves.
Yeah, I guess the issue of not being visible from legal perspective has impacts not only on stateless persons themselves, but also on the state, as you rightly said. And I think this reinforces what I said earlier about the importance of nationality.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I wanted to ask you, are there stateless people in Southeast Asia?
Unfortunately, yes. But we do not have statistic there. We know, for example, that in most countries in South Asia, there are stateless persons living there. I give you example of Thailand. At least as far as I know, there are almost 600,000 people living in Thailand without legal status. And South Asia is also hosting one of the two biggest groups of people without nationality, the stateless persons, and that is the group of people identify themselves as Rohingya. So you got almost 1 million of them in the country, in Myanmar, and then you have more than 1 million of them living outside the country. But this issue is very complex because they are not recognized as nationals of any countries, and they are rejected as well wherever they go. Although one or two countries may be not welcoming but willing to assist them. Not only we do not have statistics, but I guess there is no attempt so far to at regional level to deal with the issue collectively. I mean, because the issue of statelessness is not recognized by ASEAN as a critical problem. However, I understand that they start discussing about this, well, fortunately.
So given that it is a challenge for countries in this region, are there any particular ASEAN states that have taken steps to address statelessness in their country?
Yes, as I said, fortunately, there are some countries which start dealing with the issues. And I gave you, I guess, the best example is the Philippines. Philippines is the only country which is party to 1954 Convention regarding statelessness. They came up with some measures to address the issue of statelessness as well. Few other good examples that I would like to share with you is Cambodia. It is interesting to know that in 2000, Cambodia has only 5% of person birth registered. Then together with UN organizations, for example, UNICEF, UNFPA, in the span of 3 years, Cambodia was successful to deal with the issue of birth registration. And as we discussed earlier, that birth registration is one of the most important steps toward nationality. So Cambodia has been successful in dealing with that kind of issue. Another good example would be countries like Singapore, Indonesia, or Thailand, having amended their nationality law. In the case of Singapore and Indonesia, the amendment allows mother to confer or to pass nationality to their children, for example. So you see there are at least attempts at national level to deal with the issue of statelessness.
This concludes the class on statelessness. We looked at the causes and responses to statelessness in the region, and talked about the vulnerabilities faced. As a region, Southeast Asia has a large number of stateless people, and though governments have been working to reduce this through activities like improved birth registration and granting citizenship to people, the problem of statelessness remains a significant one for the region.